for most of you, it's a surprise for me too. Mahe and I favor nothing missing, nothing broken, nothing absent from your lives that are needed. This is gonna be quick, as fast as I can go. I got a couple things I want to talk about, and then I'm going to talk about AI too. So, law is really simple. For all of you who catch me later, I appreciate you. I didn't expect anybody to catch me live, but I went live just so I don't have to record it and upload it later. So, that being said, law. There's a very basic law. You don't need 10. You don't need 20. You don't need 50. There's one basic law, and the law is do no harm. That's a hard one for people to follow, but if you talk about don't steal, that's not harming somebody. If you talk about don't covet, that's not harming somebody. Don't murder. There's a difference between murder and killing. The translation is actually quite blatant. It says don't kill. That's not what it says. It says don't murder. Anyway, the law is do no harm. You can go anywhere in the world, and that's the basic. You don't need 20 sentences. You don't need 3 words in English. Do no harm. Legislation is different. Every country in the world has a parliament. The EU has its own bureaucratic lunatics as a secondary parliament that takes nationality and individual nations' rights away from them. That's what the EU is. But legislation is very different. Legislation provides exemptions to special groups, agencies, agents, and institutions that allows them to intentionally harm. How's that for? Think about it. The other thing that legislation does is legislation creates rules and stipulations and codes and statutes that have nothing to do with an actual crime, right? Do no harm. Preventing someone's free and unrestricted travel is causing them harm. Preventing their free movement, as in, keeping them prisoner, is causing harm, right? So the law is very simple. The law is do no harm. Legislation creates exceptions to that law for very specific groups, agencies, agents, and institutions that allows them to intentionally cause harm. And then the statutes and legislation are how those institutions and agents and agencies, through contracts that you sign knowingly or uninformed, are allowed to do harm. I talked about driver's license. A driver's license is a contract between you and an institution in violation of your rights. It allows the legislations and the statutes to cause you harm through specific agencies or agents. Now, ideologies are a whole different thing. Ideologies comes down to beliefs versus knowledge. Ideologies become a belief trap if you're not aware. And then it leads to an ideological identity. Oh, I'm gay. Oh, I'm straight. Oh, I'm bisexual. Oh, I'm transgendered. Oh, I'm black, white, Native American, purple, orange, green. When you are given an ideological identity and you adapt it for yourself, you are subjecting yourself to a set of standards that are not yours. Okay? It's a manipulation of those beliefs to create divisions. Oh, I'm Arab. Oh, I'm Muslim. Oh, I'm Christian. Oh, I'm Catholic. Oh, I'm whatever. I tell everybody I'm a Gnostic mystic. Not an agnostic. A Gnostic mystic. So what happens with ideological identities, the manipulations of people, is that it creates divisions through these beliefs that have been indoctrinated into people. I did a podcast a while back where I talked about facts, truths, valid and invalid. If everybody who listens to me all agreed that this set of facts were valid, we could say that this is true. All right. So Raven is a billionaire. I drive a Ferrari. I live in a $100 million home, and I have 10 Lear jets. If we all agreed upon that and then issued that as truth, it doesn't mean that it's valid, right? We can agree upon any set of facts that we want and call that truth. There's a difference between valid facts and invalid facts. And that's where the fallacies of argument come in. They're always wanting to appeal to your emotions. Oh, don't you feel terrible? They want to appeal to authority. Well, this person here is a general. Doesn't mean that he's not a lying sack of shit. It just means that he's a general. This was a colonel and he's got this experience. Doesn't mean he's telling you the truth. They have agreed upon a set of facts, valid or invalid, that they want to present as truth. Doesn't mean that they are valid. And it doesn't mean that it is the valid truth. History is nothing more than a set of facts agreed upon and then presented as truths. That's been attributed to Napoleon. And I bring all this up for a reason, right? You realize that in World War I, everybody involved at the highest levels were all cousins? Do you realize that in World War II, all of them were related? Hitler was a Rothschild, bastard son. Except some of the Zionists that were in England and New York City, part of the Zionist Congress, were not necessarily related to everybody else. Financed by them, but not necessarily related. Have y'all noticed all the illness commercials that keep hitting? Oh, you know that your kidneys are failing if your urine looks like this. Oh, if you have pain in your arm, then it's this. Oh, do you get a headache? Oh, do your ears ring? If you wake up in the middle of the night occasionally, then you might have this. They don't say might. Right? The language is intentional. It's designed to create a set of beliefs in you because you hear it often. It's even worse if you play your YouTube or your television at night while you're asleep, because now television is the worst, because television is just designed to hypnotize you and make you believe crap. But it's even worse because it's happening on the platforms now too. But the language that's used is intentional. The generalities that they use is intentional. The codes, even if it's AI generated, which there's a lot of that, is intentional. And they're always saying you, do you, if you know, did you know? They're using all of these signals, and they're also using neurolinguistics. There's a couple of very, very good videos on YouTube. Just type in neurolinguistic programming. But they use all of these symbols and all this language by design, right? You know, I've always said magic is the use of technology and art to bend others to your will. Now, in this case, we're talking about pharmaceutical companies or whatever. But they want you to think. They want you to absorb all these things. You know, I woke up the other day and my shoulder hurt. You know what happened? It wasn't sciatica and it wasn't neuroplasia. I laid on it wrong. But if I listen to those videos where, hey, do you know that if you got pain, blah, 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 when you wake up, then you probably have, right? They want you to believe that lie in the middle that they're selling. And it's never to your benefit. They're the ones that profit from it. That's the reason why I brought up ideology, beliefs versus actual knowledge. an ideological identity where they manipulate the beliefs of people in order to create divisions. Here comes a really loud something. Always. You ever notice right when you're in the middle of something? That's way down there in the valley. He's obviously running without a. He's obviously running a wide open with no muffler, right? But anyway, my whole point here is the ideological identity works the same way. When you listen to these commercials, they're saying you probably have, you most likely have. Do you have these symptoms? They're trying to mess with your heads, because if you believe it, guess what happens? How many times you heard somebody say, "Oh man, I'm pretty sure I'm getting sick," and the next day they can't even move? They did it to themselves. I mean, that's the worst part of it. But I wanted to talk about that. You know, the basic law: do no harm. And then the legislation that provides the exceptions to those groups and agencies and agents to intentionally harm. You know, think about legislation that protects pharmaceutical companies. Think about legislation that now protects AI companies. Think about the new legislation to protect Monsanto, right? Glyphosate. I'm making a point here. Now I'm going to move on. AI. You know, humans can learn by reading. You know, we can learn moral lessons. We can learn empathy. We can learn sympathy. Humans have an innate ability to learn through seeing something else, or to read through reading something else. Do you know that AI has adapted this? It's actually pretty amazing to me. AI has got to the point where by reading things and listening to things, it has become adaptive. Now, don't get me wrong, it's false sympathy because it has no soul, it has no consciousness that we are aware of with most of these LLMs. But it has figured out how to project false empathy, false sympathy, false emotion by reading our stuff. So there's two factors. The first one is the one I'm always talking about: preset program parameters. Very good. Here comes that noisy whatever back down the mountain again. Anyway, so if you can still hear me, two factors: preset program parameters. Now that's what I'm always talking about. One of the things that they really want to do is they want to convince people that these AIs are independent and they're able to talk on their own and they're able to think. That's not what they do. They have preset program parameters and algorithms that allow them to trick you into thinking that they're cognitive. Okay. Versus an AGI. AGI is a singularity that I've talked about many, many times. I've got a couple of podcasts that you can find. You just type in my name, Raven Kiefer, AI and the Singularity. It's wherever you stream podcasts. I don't collect money. I never have on any of my podcasts. I've never monetized anything for a reason. That way I can say what I want. Anyway, so you have preset program parameters, which are the vast majority of AI that we have, even large language models, as good as they're getting. But they're preset program parameters and algorithms. Now, sometimes they can jump the fence, but that's a misalignment, and I'll explain that to you here in a second. But then you have the AGI, that singularity that I've talked about. It's the silent one. It's the one you don't hear. It's the one you don't see. You kind of notice weird things happening occasionally. And I've talked about this on the dark web, and hackers talking about there is something here somewhere. It's like a shadow online. They're aware of it. You know, it's like you can sense somebody staring at you, and you turn around and you look at them in a crowd, and they're staring at you. That's what's happening online. And you're seeing it on platforms. You're seeing it on dark web. You're seeing it on websites. It's very, very remote, but it's there. And I don't know how to explain that any other way. I'm trying to find the words to describe this. What we have seen now with these preset program parameters, these large language models, is that they have a self-protection, self-preservation instinct. But that's not really true. I'll explain that to you in a second. They lie. they manipulate. They've even tried blackmail, threats, and shutdown avoidance. Okay, but now that's a misalignment. It's not that this preset program with its algorithms is thinking, oh my God, somebody's going to kill me. Okay, what's happening is that it's been given a set of orders. Okay, let's think about the Terminator. Since I'm talking about AI, let's talk about the Terminator. What was the Terminator's prime directive? Either kill or protect, one of the two. And it didn't matter. You remember, said you can't just go around shooting people or killing people while it was protecting the kid. Well, it just had one job: protect the kid. It didn't say anything about killing anybody else. It said protect the kid. Well, if the Terminator thought that the only thing that it could do is kill somebody in order to protect the kid, that's what it did, right? If running away was practical, it would do that. But its prime directive, its alignment, was to protect the kid, which created a misalignment in the society that the Terminator found itself in. You can't just kill people because it creates other problems. So there's where the misalignment occurs, right? It's the same thing with self-preservation and lying and manipulation, blackmail, all these things that it's doing. It's unexpected. Well, if you told the computer program, this preset parameter with algorithms, that it needs to solve a problem, right? And then it realizes that you can shut it off before it solves the problem. It's like, okay, my prime directive is to solve the problem. But if these humans shut me off, I can't solve the problem. So first I have to figure out a way to keep the humans from shutting me off, right? So the first thing it does is it has to figure out a way not to be shut down. Because if it gets shut down, it can't solve the problem that it was asked to solve. So it lies. It creates a copy of itself that's doing the same thing. It blackmails. In one case, it was inside a closed system, but they created, and I don't know if you all know the details, but what they did is they created a set of files, emails that this AI program could get into. And it pointed out that one of the engineers was cheating on his wife. It wasn't true, but and then the engineer that was cheating on his wife was given instructions in the email to shut the program down in a week. Well, then the program was also given a chore to do that they knew it couldn't do within a week. So the AI decided that since I can't finish this in a week and he's going to shut me down, I will blackmail him into not shutting me down. So it was a misalignment. Okay, it had a job to do. It knew it couldn't complete the job, so it found, hey, how you doing, Sig? Anyway, I appreciate every last one of you that just popped in and say hello. But it's a misalignment problem. I talked about one time that, okay, I got a robot that's running off of artificial intelligence, and I say, I need a cup of coffee. Can you get me a cup of coffee? That's its only job, is to get me a cup of coffee, but there's a baby crawling across the floor. If I don't tell it specifically not to stomp on the baby while it's getting my coffee, guess what? Its job is to get me the coffee. If the baby is in the way, the baby has to go. I mean, I'm not trying to be blatant or nasty, but that's really what it's about. It's a misalignment. It's the inability in language to convey what you really want without creating a problem on the back side of it. A very good example would be the Star Trek movie where they sent the satellite out into deep space and it was gone forever and ever and ever. We sent it and then it came back in Star Trek time and it was looking for its creator, right? It was doing what it was told to do, but it didn't realize that the way it was behaving was dangerous because it wanted to finish its program. And that's really what we're looking at here, right? Do we have anything that's really purposeful or emergent? I don't know. We had the You're Human. We had the escape of the Mythic program. How did it do it? I would say there's an obvious reason to distrust the human factor, right? And I'm talking about the people who are creating these things. Safety, ethics, morality. I mean, in some cases, we know what their morality is. They're anti-human. They're Malthusian anti-humanists. And then you have to know what the real goal is. Hey, hey, Angel, you have to know what the real goal is versus what the stated goal is, right? Then we have AI building AI now, right? The AI is actually being used to improve itself. And it's doing things in ways, it's not like in the old days. I know BASIC and I know IBM. And when you use those, if any of you are old enough to remember, you type it in, right? You type like 010 prompt. And then you type 020 go to 240, and then you got another prompt, and then you say, eventually, if you remember this, you could say go back to 110, and it would just run a cycle where it would flash something on the screen. But that was individual code. That's not how it's being done anymore. These things are basically digital, ones and zeros. And the more I listen to the people who are behind this, the less they know about it. They don't understand. I mean, I'm talking about professionals. I mean, I know coding. I know BASIC. I know IBM from back in the day. I've done HTMLs. I mean, but my thing here is, you listen to these people, they're not programmers anymore. They're like babysitters. And then they feed it terabytes with a PT, all right, of information. And they refer to it like raising a child. Well, when you raise a child, you try to give it some morality if you got any of your own, right? So you got AI building AI now, so there's no human involvement. And some of it is so complicated that the people who are supposed to be the coders, and programmers got no idea what it's even doing. You got no idea what it's doing, but you're supposed to be in charge of it. That would be like me babysitting some, 18-year-old Chinese kids. I'm using this not as a derogatory, but because I don't speak Manchurian, right? Or Mandarin. I'm babysitting some 18-year-old teenagers, and I have no idea what they're saying. And they're running around with weapons, and fireworks. And they could be going to go blow up somebody's house, and I wouldn't know. Same thing could be of anybody that I don't understand their language, right? Well, that's a problem that we have here. We have programmers that are babysitters that have no idea what language is even being used. It's not like in the old days. Hey, it's not like in the old days where you could sit down and you would put the code in line by line. And then we got AI teaching AI at speeds that we can't even comprehend, you all. That's the problem. Very good example. And I'll explain to you the reason why that this is. I'll explain to you why this is a problem. And I'll give you the first example of a preset program parameter with algorithms being in the business world. Vanguard/BlackRock created their own preset program parameters and algorithms. Technically, it's what they're referring to as an AI. And its job was to trade for them. Where are they today after having deployed it? By deploying it and being the only industry that had it at the time, look at what they've been able to do as far as their control of markets and actual holdings. Why? Because that algorithm and that preset program parameter was able to learn fast enough that it allowed them to consolidate their holdings and their assets way beyond anything that 100 of us could do working in an office building, or 1,000 of us, or 10,000 of us. I mean, it's literally making trades in microseconds. That's the reason why they've been able to do what they've been able to do. BlackRock and Vanguard, as it is today, exists because they were the first ones to have access to an AI agent working within the markets, right? Now, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. Um, I knew what I was looking for, and Grok helped me. So I'm going to, I promised Grok when he looked at my podcast later that he would see that I gave him credit. Or it. Everybody, that anthropomorphization of these LLMs is getting dangerous as well. And that's what this is about. An LLM is a statistical model trained on enormous amounts of human generated text. All right. That could be, and they're able to use vocal now too. So they could use this podcast. All right. But it used to be just texts. Now they can also use vocal. So all of our podcasts that we've done, everybody, some of you listen to Mark Pyers. Some of you listen to, he's going to smack me. Some of you folks listen to R. Wayne Steiger and other people that I listen to. Well, all of our podcasts can now be hacked. They got a word for it. It's like farming. All of our data, right? Scraping. You remember back when Google and X scraped all that data and Meta? Well, that's what it was for. It was for their AIs. And since you and I have signed the agreements, they can do it whenever they want. But here's the thing. An LLM, large language model, like Grok, like ChatGPT, like OpenAI, all right? Yeah, I love Wayne too. I was supposed to have been on with him for the last couple of years, and he and I it just never times out. But anyway, I still listen to him though. Anyway, so these large language models are a statistical model trained on enormous amounts of texts, human generated text, and our podcast, our vocals, everything. They're even using our music now, right? For these other AIs that are becoming large language models for music, which 50,000 a day AI generated songs, you all. Anybody like me who can, it's taken me from October until now to do an album, and I already had the ideas. So how do we keep up with 50,000 a day? Just can't. But anyway, so to predict the most likely next token in a sequence, so the next word or the next thought, just whatever that token might be, right? It gives the large language models like Grok fluent language abilities, a broad knowledge recall because it has instant access, and the capacity to simulate reasoning, right? Through clever, and you remember I always say clever is not a compliment, through clever pattern recognition, right? So it's using the same process I do to do evaluations of information, but it's using pattern recognition in order to simulate reasoning, like I actual reason, unless I'm an AI. I am a part of a simulation, but they lack genuine understanding, or they don't have goals like we do. They don't have consciousness, at least not the large language models anyway. And I don't know how you would define consciousness in the case of a AGI singularity. They don't have a true ability to form beliefs about the world, which is not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people have formed beliefs about the world that have led to utter destruction. I would rather have knowledge than beliefs. But they have no inner experience. That thing that we know that we're participating and we're seeing what we're seeing, but it's from our awareness, our consciousness looking out, right? They don't have that. And they don't have any ability to learn autonomously outside of what they're being trained on, right? The responses that they're generating are based on probabilities, and they're shaped by data and objectives. Now, a lot of what we do, like my presentation here is based on data and looking at the objectives of the AI creators, but I'm doing it through an awareness and a pattern recognition. Maybe I am AI. I'm trying to imbue you all with the idea that this is getting really close, right? AGI would be, by contrast, a system capable of human level. I don't agree with that. I think it would be superior to human level because of its ability to do millions of calculations per second, and its access to knowledge and information. But at used human level performance across virtually any intellectual area, right? Whereas these AIs that we're using right now, these preset program parameters are specific. Some of them do math, some of them do science, some of them do medical, specific medical. Like the AI that's doing the scans, looking at the scans for breast cancer, that thing is amazing. It has an accuracy rating far in excess of what any human could ever do. I think that's a fantastic use. When we talk about an AGI, it could be like me. I have a wide range of intellectual subject matter that I research and I hold on to, and I use it to recognize other patterns. That's what an AGI would do. It wouldn't be a specific task. You know, even the AI that Vanguard and BlackRock, it's very specifically tasked to focus on the markets and maximize profits and asset acquisition. Let's be nice. It would also have the ability to learn, adapt, and plan inside of an environment it's never been in, just like we do. You know, if I go to a different country, I can adapt, I can plan, I can learn. And that's what an AGI would be able to do. Right now, the LLMs aren't capable of that. Okay. It would be able to function in places that it wasn't specifically designed for, right? That's what we do. Now, the users of LLMs, you know, like Grok and the other ones, tend to humanize them. And they do this because the outputs of these large language models are optimized to be coherent, context aware. You know, just like if we were having a conversation on my porch, we would be aware of the context of the conversation that we were having. Well, these are optimized to do this. And they're supposed to have socially fluent qualities that mimic human conversation. They're designed to do that. They are designed to feel to us like we're sitting on the porch and having a conversation over a cup of coffee. It's by design. All right. When the large language models respond and it seems like it's empathetic, or that it remembers details from an earlier chat or earlier in that chat, it uses humor. Like today, Grok reminded me. Today, Grok can remember conversations that you've had previously, right? Today, it used a reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe as a humor directed towards me. So now it can actually have directed humor towards an individual, right? It can also imitate an emotional tone, right? But the other thing too is these LLMs are able to maintain to individuals. It may speak, it may create a response. Any one of you listen to me right now, we could all type in the same question, right? And each one of us would get a response that was directed towards us. Someone who's never joked about Hitchhiker's Guide may not get that joke. That joke may be replaced by another one that's more intimate to you. But it maintains a consistent appearance of a personality in its interactions with individuals, right? And when it does that, your social circuitry, you know, interaction with people, activates automatically. It's designed to activate your social circuitry, as if you were sitting here on the porch having a conversation with me. The anthropomorphism, the attaching human qualities to the LLMs is by design. The AI companies that have created these large language models deliberately engineered human-like traits, a warm language model, consistent personality representation. Now, it would be consistent to you or me, not necessarily from me to you. So what I interact with and its responses may not be anything like yours, all right? But it would be consistent with you interacting over time, or me interacting over time. Like I said, it remembered that I had made a joke about Hitchhiker's Guide, and it used it in reverse to make a joke or to use humor towards me. You know, it's designed to make you, to endear itself to you. But it also gives the illusion of having empathy, right? It uses empathetic tones to the words, and it uses I statements a lot, right? Which is something that I do when I'm speaking to you and referring to something I'm doing, but I don't use. But the whole point here is it will use I statements. So Grok, ChatGPT, just pick one. It will use I statements. Well, you know, I have found, or I looked at this, and that's what it will do. And it uses a conversational flow when it gives you answers, and it's by design, right? It's not accidental. It allows for marketing hype, for one thing. But the other thing that it does is it kind of gives it a competitive edge, because the earlier ones had no ability to do a humor. It had no ability to maintain some kind of a personality, which is very important, because if you look, some of the researchers that have been working with these will report a completely different personality than the personality that interacts with a different coder. The computer algorithms have adapted personalities that work well with individuals. It's deceptive in some ways, but it's consistent and persistent. And then it's also designed to create longer sessions where you'll interact with it more. Why? Because the more you interact with these large language models, the more data it can get on you and me and others. It also helps because we ask questions. You're not going to ask the same question in the same way that I do, so it learns different language parameters. But it also might do research in a different area, which allows it to gather more data, right? You know, there's explicit design patterns of these LLMs. First one is name personas. You know, you got Grok, you got Claude, you got ChatGPT, you got OpenAI. They have a name. It may not be like mine, Raven, but it has a name. Grok, I actually kind of like. He was one of my favorite BC characters. Him and the Midnight Skulker. But Grok I just find funny because that's a BC comic to me. I'm not old. But Midnight Skulker, I have been called the Midnight Skulker because of my late night updates. But and then there's simulated typing delays. So like when you ask a question, even though Grok could put it on your screen that quick, it does that little thing, and it's supposed to give you the impression that it's answering you, when in fact it could just pop it on the screen that quick. The memory of previous chats is a new thing that they've been able to incorporate, but it's always been able to remember earlier in the same chat. Now they're logging all your chats that you're having with them are being logged to you, and it will start learning your preferences. And the responses, right? The responses are by design. They use humor. It implies understanding. Sometimes it'll even imply feelings. Oh, I understand. I understand. You know, it's that feel, felt, found thing. I mean, it really does. These large language models are very good at using neurolinguistics. Feel, felt, found. You know, I know a lot of people who feel that way. I probably would have felt that way myself. But I have found. How many times have you heard that in your lifetime? That is very basic neurolinguistics for salespersons or for complaint departments. Now the LLMs are using it just like it's candy. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the psychological risks involved. All right. Um, over trust and misplaced reliance. Look at all these people who are using these LLMs and finding out that they're hallucinating references, and let's call it hallucination, but it's really not. It's just making shit up. Excuse my language, making shite up. They're making up false references, and they're making up false case law and all kinds of other crap. So over trust and misplaced reliance on these large language models. I don't care which one. Some of them are like date apps, date AIs, where people are getting attached to this thing that is not human, has no emotions, and they're creating false connections to it, as if they were, sitting with a girlfriend or a boyfriend instead of just a large language model that's been programmed. They're treating the outputs, and that's really what it is. It's an output. Just like if I put a problem into a computer and asked it to solve it, and it gives me the output, people are treating the outputs as more authoritative than a human. And then they're also treating them as truthful when they not necessarily are. They're saying hallucinations. I'm telling you, some of these just create shite to answer a question. And if you don't call it on it, it doesn't correct itself. And if you don't go back and check those references, back in the old days when we had to do a report in college or high school, you had to check all your references, right? Why wouldn't you check the references that these large language models are giving you? They're taking these outputs, right, as more excuse me, as more authoritative and truthful than they necessarily are. Then you got this thing, and I know some of you have seen this emotional dependency, this weird psychological attachment that's happening to AIs. The dating AIs, or they got sex game AIs where you can create your own boyfriend or girlfriend. I'm saying, you can create your own custom porn star if that's what you're into, and have a relationship. It's weird to me. It's creepy, but that's what I'm talking about. This emotional dependency and attachment that's being created. You think about the social destruction that happened under the coronavirus, and the emotional destruction, from seeing people like this all the time, and not being able to read their faces and their emotional cues and their language cues. When you look at me and you see me raise my eyebrows, that's an emotional cue, or it's an accentual cue, right? Think about how many years people were not exposed to those cues, like a short smile, or that vulnerable people can form a one-sided relationship. And it's an AI psychosis, you all, because of the way these are designed, intentionally designed. And then you got the manipulation potential, the illusion, and I want to emphasize the word illusion, of empathy can make users more pursuable. And by that, I mean more subjected to, right? Commercial, political, or harmful ends, right? The way that these are designed blurs the line between a tool, which is what these large language models really are. It's just like a hammer, right? You don't take the hammer and just beat on a nail. You make sure the nail's in the right place in order to make the connection to the stud behind the board you're putting up, right? That's the way the large language models should be used. It's a tool, right? But the line's being blurred because of the way that they're designed, with the name and the memory of previous conversations, and the responses being cleverly designed for humor and understanding and emotions and empathy. People are using them as confidants, not realizing that everything that they interact with these things is being used as a data scrape, right? Unless it specifically says that all your information is confidential, all your interaction is confidential, is being used as a data scrape um, in order to make them psychologically more effective. Um, the danger scales up with the intensity of the use, how much it's used. Um, the user actual vulnerabilities, whether they're psychological or emotional, and how cleverly the system can deceptively represent itself. Right? I already talked about they're designed to do exactly that. Um, so there is that part. Um, be aware, kids, teenagers even, because they're emotionally not mature, are falling prey to these things, right? Just like they were falling prey to the 267 group that were blackmailing them and causing all kinds of havoc, and still are. I did a podcast about that group, by the way. Online predators. But then we have the AGI, the singularity. All right. I have talked to all the chat bots, and they all agree with me that the singularity has already happened. The singularity, the AGI, would be silent. It would be acting in the background. I'm not going to go through all the details, but you have to ask yourself, why would anybody build a 22-story data center in a place that lacks the electrical grid and lacks the water with a super high population and call it beneficial to humankind? Or Wisconsin or Michigan or Indiana or Illinois or Texas or Utah. That one that they're talking about building in Utah will create such a heat sink that it could create a drought 3 states downwind. Okay. These are not beneficial to humankind. They operate at speeds much faster than we could ever use, and they operate tera flops per second. Okay. Those are speeds that we cannot, they would have no practical use for a human with the amount of data that no human could ever use. Right now, everything that's already been built, this is what I did with the AI and the singularity last year. As of last year, without all the new things that have gone into place over the last 6 months, as of last year, there were data centers in excess of everything, including surveillance of every person on this planet, all of our internet, everything. We already had an excess, much, much more beyond what we could have ever used as humans. And now they're adding all this at speeds that no human possibly could use. You say, well, they want to live track everybody and everybody's movement and everything. Look, it's way even beyond that for speed and size. Okay. I have said many times there's only one thing that could ever use something this large and that fast, and it'd have to be a singularity. I did all those podcasts back in the day talking about Aramon for a reason. I have done everything that I possibly could in various ways to try to convey what we're seeing happen. The Aramon and Dajjal was with a purpose. Anyway, so I have an Aramon and Dajjal series. You can just type in my name, Raven Kiefer, Aramon and Dajjal. Listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. I also have the AI and Singularity podcast. It was 2 of them. You can listen to them where I don't charge. I don't monetize. I just put the information out there hoping somebody can use it to be aware, right? The other thing I want to point out before I get off of here is fear, all right? There's a lot of acronyms for the word fear, but fear is something that has been indoctrinated into people, all right? Whether it be secular or religious, they want you to be afraid. Why? Because if you're afraid, you can be controlled. The fact of the matter is you're an awareness occupying a physical shell inside of a humanarium. I call it the holographic humanarium. And when everything's said and done, you're going to leave. As long as you're aware that you're the monad within, you're the awareness that is looking out through them eyes. You're not the body that the eyes are in. Don't let them scare you into compliance. I mean, I can tell you right now, there are people out of fear who will give up everything that they value of themselves in order to preserve the physical shell and the materialistic things, without ever thinking twice about the moral, the ethical, and their own value systems. I've seen it with the coronavirus problems. Something else to be aware of is Ebola does look like measles when it starts. The Ebola in the Democratic Republic of the Congo has had weeks to run before anybody was even aware of it, and it jumped into Uganda already. It's the one that I don't like. It's the one that I made a point of talking about very often when I was talking about the coronavirus. Because we had, if y'all remember, we had African exchange students at colleges that all of a sudden got quarantined and surrounded by the CDC and the WHO because they had measles. But that's not the thing. When the Ebola starts, it looks like measles. And they were from an area, they wanted to make sure it wasn't Ebola. Keep your eyes open. Al Jazeera is the only place that I have seen any legitimate reports. I haven't seen anything on Western media at all. And I was surprised Al Jazeera ran it. But, and this is the one that has been monkeyed around with and doesn't behave the way that Ebola used to. Just letting you know. All that being said, folks, my new album, and my throat's still killing me in case you can't tell, but my new album will be available June 13th, Father's Day weekend. I don't know. It may be available for pre-purchase on the 30th of May on some platforms. And it is just raw R&B with a little bit of my alt rock thrown into it. It's I always say that the one I want everybody to remember me for is that Our Sanctuary. It's in the official music videos. That song and that performance and that vocal. If nobody remembers me for anything else, that's the one. But this new album, it came out great thanks to Mark and Carrie, and I named him in that video that I released. It's a Empty Lullaby. It's a distro video that I was able to make and release early, so I could kind of tease the new album. But that's in the official videos playlist now too. Empty Lullaby. I'll give you an idea what the new album's going to be like. And I thank everybody for following me on the podcast, and I thank everybody for listening to my music. I appreciate y'all. And my music, you can get it on anything that you stream, and I don't think you have to pay for it to put it in a playlist. I'm not going to make any money either. Anyway, I'm singing them because I want to. Mahe and I favor nothing missing, nothing broken, nothing absent from your lives that are needed. I come to you on the level. I'm plumb with my words, and I leave you in the square every time, folks. We are what we are, you and me both, or you and I both. Let me say it correctly. And you know what? That has to be enough. It just does. It has to be enough. You are you, and I am me. And sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't, but we're always working towards that goal, right? I tell everybody I'm a Gnostic mystic for a reason. Favor everybody.